Connecting Consciousness update, also the Christmas special. We've all been so busy we weren't able to get the usual choir together. Remember the last few years we managed to get something through, but what with all the COVID lockdowns and the difficulties that everyone's under, hasn't proved so possible this year. So this is definitely going to try and be upbeat in the sense that we've made it through another year, and we're looking forward to Christmas. Must never forget what that's really all about. I want to do a little bit of an update, and then of course Becky is going to be there to ask the questions, and then we'll both thank all of our coordinators and the membership. So I want to just quickly go in with some of the updates. You will be aware that some of us have been predicting a lockdown for the United Kingdom. Some people have said a worldwide lockdown. That's possible, but certainly for the United Kingdom, which we felt would happen over Christmas. And that's a good guy lockdown. Now, I know that many people would say, how can any lockdown be a good guy lockdown? Aren't the good guys about ensuring that we have freedom? But I would just remind everybody that Britain is perhaps the heart of a lot of bad things, and that the so-called 10 days of darkness are required to get to grips with a lot of things in Britain that up to now haven't been dealt with. So the best way to look at this would be, if we get locked down on the 21st or the 22nd of December, then the bad guys are in control. If we get locked down from the 27th onwards, the good guys are in control, because the good guys intend at least to give us a Christmas Day and a Boxing Day, whereas the bad guys don't give a damn. And the reason for it is the bad guys are trying to preempt the good guys' lockdown. So yes, they're using this Omicron variant, this new variant that suddenly appeared from nowhere, and I suppose that a good guy can take whatever's given. If the traffic light is red and it holds everything up, then good guy will say, yeah, that'll do me, and have what they want. And of course we have talked about the 10 days, and so 2 weeks is the lockdown they're talking about, so that's 10 working days, so I can go with that. So for me, that's the key point. If we lock down 21st, 22nd of December, that's not good. But if we're locked down from the 27th onwards, then I don't think it's good, but I think that tells me that the good guys are using that cover to do what they want to do. All right, so there are an incredible amount of things going on, and even people who are cursory looking into the alternative news, the truth news, are beginning to realize that actually what they're reading is the truth. The mainstream has become totally insane. It was only just a few short weeks ago that Boris Johnson himself was saying that the vast majority of people in hospital with COVID were those who've been double vaccinated. He said that himself, and now the message is everyone in hospital who has COVID is because they haven't been inoculated. We've had official reports saying that if you've had 2 jabs, your immune system could be permanently lowered, whereas if you have not had those injections and you catch COVID, and of course you come back from it, you're probably immune, if not for life, for a very long period of time. So the mainstream is now lying on itself. I mean, we always knew that it would lie against the truth, but now it appears to be lying on itself. So the mainstream will say something on Monday and then lie on itself on the Tuesday. And I just reached a point now where I don't think they even know themselves what they're turning out. So there is good news in the sense that, real bad people have been dealt with. And if we were to make a list of all of the chief executives or government officials over the last 12 months who have mysteriously resigned, it would be the greatest list we've ever had. More to do, I know, but that's what's occurring. The big question is Christmas Day. Will there be another CGI Queen's speech? Will the Queen be too ill to deliver the speech and someone else do it? Or will there be no speech at all? it's really interesting. And on a music channel today, where the adverts came in, they were advertising or auditions getting ready for the platinum celebrations, the Queen's Platinum Jubilee, which is next year. So I really don't know whether the Queen's going to be around for the Platinum Jubilee, but that's what the mainstream are pushing for. Clearly, they're putting out contracts, they're getting musicians together. The BBC is very much part of that. And if the Queen's death is announced before, then I suppose they'll have a requiem and they'll just do what they've got to do. So the mainstream isn't holding back, it's not stopping, it's still pushing forward, and it's becoming more and more determined in its desperate attempt to try and push some sort of vision across. We've got more and more demonstrations in Britain taking place. One outside Downing Street. You've got Jeremy Corbyn's brother been arrested for inciting violence. He was saying that any member of parliament that votes for the lockdown go and burn their offices down. Tony got arrested for that. But there are huge numbers of demonstrations now, and as we will look, it's political suicide for any politician now to lock a country down. And I just don't think that Boris Johnson and his gang are in charge anymore. I just don't think they care. I don't think they're bothered. In that sense of the word, they're just doing what they're told. But there is a strong cabal element that is trying to preempt the good guy operation. So no matter how many times people say, oh, the good guys are in control, I've always said that there is a cabal group that is resisting and fighting and determined to try and overcome it. But if we look from CC's perspective, with all the people we have all over the world almost, the number of good reports, and there was a good one from Australia. I haven't even had a chance to talk to our Australian coordinators, but it looks like the government's just been served a common law notice, which we were looking at Australia and South Africa, two important countries that have seen, if not military action, they've seen very strong action. We know that the US Marshals were actually out in South Africa, and we know that they're actually there in Australia as well. They're not there to serve legal documents, but they're there to coordinate the ground, the indigenous people who are fighting back. And I think that we'll see some strong moves simply because those two countries, South Africa and Australia, have had some of the worst lockdowns across the planet. And we do actually need to see more action in the public eye. And I do hope, let's just say we are in lockdown in the United Kingdom from the 27th onwards. I hope that it's really in people's faces, because I speak to our members, so does Becky, so do our coordinators, and we're all heartily sick of so much news that's been pumped out. I won't give any names of people, but there's a prolific people sending out the most prolific, every sort of 2 seconds stuff comes out, and the feedback is now people are tired of it. In the early days they were fired up and excited and enthusiastic, but now people are just heartily sick of it, because I think we know the truth. We know exactly what's what. We don't need to be told it anymore. What we actually want is for someone to get on and do something about it. And remember that as a citizen, there is actually only so much you can do. And you're seeing that across the countries now, where people are demonstrating. They are throwing rocks and bottles and stuff like that. And, police are getting injured and demonstrators are getting injured, and we're seeing that. We're not seeing it at a high violence level, but we are seeing those demonstrations now taking place. What more can citizens actually do? That's we continually get told by the military, we don't want you to get involved in violence. Well, then that's fine, but how else do we bring about change? How else do we show the people in the top positions that we're not taking this anymore? And I think the best answer to those questions I've just posed is somebody else like the military actually acting in the public eye. And it doesn't have to be tanks on the street. I've never advocated that. But what I have advocated is that, we have the same old faces in power, but the policies suddenly change. And I was having a discussion with a group of CC members not so long ago, and I said to them, look, let's arbitrarily take Britain, and we'll take the Houses of Parliament, 635 lawmakers, whatever it is. Well, if you want to sack 600 of them, because 600 are not good and 35 are good, if you do it overnight, literally, and as an ex-politician myself, I'd tell you within 3 weeks the country would grind to a halt. You wouldn't even be able to get a parking permit for your car from your local council, because all of this is interconnected. And so the ideal thing, I think, is to remove the core group, who are perhaps the most troublemakers and the most evil, replace them, and then start to work through. Because you can't just wipe out a whole legislature, you can't wipe out a whole government and just switch over. You have to do it gradually. So what we should be looking for is not necessarily the replacement of the same old faces, although that would be most welcome, but suddenly a complete change in policy. So, for instance, you've got a policy that says, which I believe will be coming for Britain anyway, you can't socialise outside of your household. And we had that last year, and I think that's going to come back. So suddenly, if the same old face says, well, I'm doing away with that policy now, then we'll think, right, well, somebody then is controlling the narrative. And that's, I think, is a first sign. So don't be looking for these big faces just to suddenly disappear, or look for the policy change and then these people to disappear. And those of you who've been very kind and listened to me for a long time now, I've often talked about my experiences in politics and what was wrong with it and what I believed we needed to do. And I've always said that the danger in politics is that you vote for individuals. You vote for a party and an individual. And the key to this is that you're not actually holding that individual accountable for a policy. And so I know the Labour Party would produce a little glossy card with 5 or 6 key points on it. And then you go around to people's doors and you say, this is what we stand for. And I was always a bit of a maverick. So I was a politician and elected. I would say, this is what we stand for. However, these are my own personal goals. This is what I'm aiming for. So I would much rather that you would re-elect me or not based on what I want to do and what I'm telling you I plan to do, rather than just these national figures, which frankly I haven't got any control over at all. Because local people, they do care nationally, but they actually care locally as well. So about 7-8 years ago, I started saying what we needed to do is vote for policies, not individuals, because it's very hard to hold an individual account when that's just one person within a large party. So what I think we'll be moving to in the near future is where on our quantum laptops we'll be voting for policies at a local level, at a regional level, and then at a national level. So I won't be voting for a politician or a political party. We'll be voting for something to occur locally, regionally, or nationally. And what that does is it strips out all of the politics. There's no need for political parties anymore because we don't need them. We the people would actually be offered a number of policies that are possibilities, and they might say to us, look, we can't fund more than 2 of them, but here's 5. You choose your top 2 and we'll go with that. So there's no politician telling you what you can and can't do. And that's ultimately where I think we're headed. We can do away with all of these layer of government. And if you remove politics as we understand it, and you do away with taxes, then you reduce the amount of money going through into government, so you don't employ as many people. So maybe the government as we understand it and the machinery of central government might be reduced by 60%. I know a lot of people are banding figures around a lot more, but if I just said a 60% reduction, then that would be quite wonderful, because it would mean instead of people having the time to twiddle their thumbs and create the most outlandish policies that hurt people, that actually be responding to, well, my street light doesn't work. There's a bloody great big hole in the road and my car's just gone over it and it's damaged my car. When are you going to fix that hole? Or that building's been derelict for 5 years. When are you going to do anything about that? Or, there's these bloody rapists hanging around the school. What are you going to do about that? So instead of them creating these ridiculous policies, they can actually do what the public want, and that, I think, would focus the mind. So I'm all for that. As a politician myself, I never had time for all these dreaming in the sky policies, when what the public needed was action on the ground now. And we could hopefully see that right across, with the police force actually responding to what the public want, not what their political paymasters want. I had a very good friend who was an armed response cop in Britain, and it costs a huge amount of money to pay someone to do that job, and it's a very stressful job. And he told me himself, so it wasn't third story. He told me himself how one day he was called in by an inspector or chief inspector and told that he was going to go out with a speed camera and catch motorists because the Home Office had told them they were down on their quota. And I think most people would be terrified to learn that the police actually have a target and a quota, but they do. I think it started to be brought under Margaret Thatcher when she was Prime Minister. Anyway, he argued and said, well, it's ridiculous. It's cost hundreds of thousands to train me, and you want me out making money for the government. What happens if there's an emergency the other side of town? I'm stuck on some bridge over a motorway. And luckily for him, the sergeant came and backed him up, and so the chief inspector or whoever was backed down. But they went for him after that because he'd shown a bit of determination, and so in the end he had a bit of a he went sick because they obviously didn't want him anymore. So it isn't just the politicians that have got to be cleared out. It's a whole raft of government that have bent to the way the system wants rather than what the people want. I'm not knocking individual people. I'm not criticizing police officers. I'm not criticizing doctors or nurses or teachers. I'm criticizing the political paymasters who make the system. So when I go into a hospital, an A&E, whether I want something, it's not how do we work to make this person's life better. It's this person must fit in with our system. And that's right across the board. Whenever we engage with officialdom, it's about how we have to do what they want. We have to play the game, otherwise we just get left behind. So it's never really about the needs of the individual at the moment. It's about the needs of the corporation or the institution or the agency or the government. And it's inhumane, and frankly it's demeaning, and it's got to stop. So I'm hoping that when we go through after Christmas, we remove maritime naval law, we go to common law. I hope that on the 15th of December we had the bankruptcy of the United States Corporation, United States Incorporated. There isn't a penny left other than day-to-day transactions, and administrative Biden can sign as many bits of paper and checks as he wants. There is no money to roll it through. And we've had one of the justices in the Supreme Court, a really good guy, come out and say, look, Biden's broken the law. He's the president of a company that doesn't exist anymore. And the reality here is, I think what we'll find is that more and more middle stream managers will begin to back away from the hole that they're facing into. But the bottom line for all of us is that we need to see action in the public face. And that's why the EBS is such a popular topic with people, because there can be no other advert for truth and the demise of the mainstream than an EBS. But it may not happen like that. It may be that Trump's Truth Channel becomes the EBS, and it may be that it carries on that. I genuinely don't know. But I do know that Trump is the president, and at some point we should be expecting him back fairly soon. I just hope that we get enough action in the public eye, because who are being hurt at the moment? Actually, it's not the unawake and unaware. The people who've had 2 injections, spiritually, emotionally, relatively every day of the week aren't hurt. They're just doing what they're happily to do. It's those likes of us, those who've not chosen to be vaccinated, those of us who have chosen to fight the matrix, to see the truth. We're the ones being hurt. Look, in Australia, you can't now legally go into a store unless you have a passport, a vaccine passport. Thank goodness there are some shopkeepers like us who are not forcing it, because how else do people, how do you live? You know, it's all very well for people to say this is a great time and enjoy it. What if you're in Australia and you don't choose to be vaccinated, and you go into a store and they say, sorry, we're not serving you any food? How are you going to get food? Well, legally, you're not, are you? So you have to find another method. And, you know, it's all very well for people to say, oh, this is a great time. But if it was forced that way around and they were the ones going into a shop and being told, you know, no, you can't. So, you know, in Britain and America, we don't have that vaccine passport system. So commentators in America can say that, you know, it's great, people are waking up and, you know, it's going well. But if you're in a country that's got bloody passport system, it isn't so great, is it? And so let's not forget there are people in other countries that are truly suffering. People like us, not stupid and ignorant, unawake people. They're not suffering. They've had 2 jabs and the booster on top of the booster, and then the booster on top of the booster on top of the booster. Their arm will be absolutely like a Swiss cheese full of holes. They're quite happy as Larry. You know, they just go on and do what they're told, and there's no problem for them. So it's the very people who support the white hats, the very people who support the good guys, who are being hurt and punished. And sometimes perhaps we need to remind the white hats that it is their base, if you like, their supporters who are actually being impacted at the moment. Whereas those people who just do what they're told, little robots, there's no impact on them at all. So, you know, sometimes, you know, I think my voice is good because there's so many people I hear saying how great it is and how good it is, and everyone's waking up and it's not a problem. Well, it is a problem, actually. It's a horrible time. Yeah, if you look back in 10 years' time, and we look back and we'll say that was the pivot, that was a changing point, and wasn't that great? Yeah, but not when you're the enemy of the state, as millions of us are. I mean, according to the BBC, 6 million people didn't take the vaccine in Britain. But according to official figures, it's over 20 million people haven't had the vaccine in Britain. So this is why the whole of the stuff coming out of mainstream is just one long lie. And frankly, we need evidence that it's going to be cleaned up. We need evidence of that. We need to be shown that that okay, the individuals may not change who are running it, but the instructions they get has to be changed. And so we'll only know it when they start talking the truth. We'll only know it when the rules and laws change. And that's how we'll know it, when mainstream goes off, when we perhaps get an EBS or we get something that, you know, everybody is forced to hear or watch. And so what I'm saying, I think, in this personal part of it is that we're now just a few days away from Christmas. We've been through this already, all of us. And I think we're all tremendously resolute. And I think it's wonderful how strong we've all been. But I don't think it's wrong now for us to say, actually, we've done our bit now. It's time for you guys to do yours. You now have to step in, and you have to do it in a way that's much more obvious. So I'll come on to my final bit before we go on to the questions with Becky. And this isn't to frighten anybody. It's not to say that I agree with it. It's just to talk about how politics works. And that's this. And I'm going to use the scenario as I did with my coordinators of a sweets shop or a candy store. And this is a big sweet shop, and it's got 100 assistants working in the candy store, 100. And there are 10 managers. And those 10 managers have gone bad. And we're good guys, all the CCs, good guys, and we go in and we arrest all the 10 managers. We take control of the sweet store. We've got the till, and we've got the telephone, and we've got the fax, and we've got all of the stuff we need to do our online orders. And we change all the posters, all the advertising, we change all that. Do I need now to tell my 100 employees exactly what the other people did? Or do I just say, well, we've taken control of the candy store. The employees don't need to know what the other guys did because we're just going to run it the way it should be run. So what I'm saying is there is going to be a considerable movement from some people not to share all of the truth with the citizens of the world for the reasons I've given. Because if I, in my hypothetical candy store scenario, say to 100 people, well, actually, those managers were abusing children. They were doing this, doing that. I might have 50 of those employees in my candy store suddenly go off sick because the reality that they were working and living in the candy store while these so-called bosses that they idolized and looked up to, who were, doing really well business-wise, were doing all these evil things, and they never even knew it. They never even saw it. Now I've got a real job because I've got a candy store that needs 100 people to run it, but I've only got 50 clerks. So how do I manage it? So what I'm saying is there's going to come a battle where some people are going to say, let's not tell the truth, the whole truth to everyone. Let's just tell them some of the truth. And my view is that the truth about the children must be told. I think it's really important. And those of you who are listening to me, you may be actually quite shocked to learn that the vast majority of mainstream patriots in the United States don't have a full grasp of the children's situation, not a full grasp of it. They have a very strong grasp that Biden has destroyed the southern wall, have a very strong grasp that Biden is responsible for all this illegal immigration, a very strong grasp that there are lots of container ships and there's a food shortage and a clothing shortage and a semiconductor shortage for cars. They have a very strong idea that their gas, and I'm talking about fuel for their motor cars here, has gone up through the roof. And that's what's driving so many traditional United States patriots. When you inject things like Biden's an actor, or underground bases, or paedophilia, that group, that's not in their world. That's not in their world at all. And the messages that we must bring are much greater than Trump good, Biden bad. Now, that's a really easy soundbite, but the reality is, I've always said that I believe, maybe I'm wrong, but I believe that the people deserve all of the truth laid before them, and we should have enough respect for people to say they need to have that truth so that they then can go away and make the decisions they want. I'm uncomfortable personally in holding back truth from people unless it's a national security thing that would impact lives. So in other words, there's certain things you can't talk about because people could lose their lives. But generally speaking, I think it's really important that the human race understands what has happened and also how the human race has allowed this to happen without a feeling of guilt. I think it's very important that people are educated as to when you take your hand off the steering wheel, when the people of the world are so busy doing their own things that they're not bothered who rules them, this is what occurs. So it's not a downbeat podcast. This is quite a positive podcast in the sense that I know where we're going. I know that the QFS system is ultimately what's going to happen. It's where it's going to be. We know there are going to be some fantastic humanitarian projects done. We are getting reports, credible reports, where people's credit card bills are being paid off mysteriously, where people's loan for their cars are being paid off. And that's what's coming. It's called a debt jubilee. There's so much that's coming, but most people who've been in a war, and we're just focusing on, let's see the mainstream media come down, let's see these top politicians being hauled off to jail. I mean, we're at that level, really. And I'll finally finish before we go on to the questions by saying an EBS, mainstream coming down, that doesn't actually hurt the bad guys. That is all the real theatre, the real pantomime. That actually is for the public. It's part of the public's awakening process, because if you do an EBS, it doesn't affect the bad guys. I'm taking down mainstream. It doesn't affect them except they can't get their lies out. So all of that is for show, as a marker, a milestone for the general public to understand something has occurred. All of the real stuff is being done now, covert stuff. All of the material changes for the world, all of the actions are being done behind the scenes. Now, it's for awake and aware people, that's terribly, terribly frustrating, because we want that in the public eye, because we want to be able to push it in the face of those idiots who have chosen not to see the truth. And they are idiots, because they've had long enough now, frankly, to see the truth. And so we the awakened, actually want it so that we can say to people, look, you can't get away from that. But that doesn't help the white hat operation. If it's being done covertly, there's a reason why. And all we ask as the awakened aware of the earth is that the truth does come out, and that it is in the face of all these people who slavishly, and I'm using that word deliberately, slavishly followed their slave master's instructions to them, which would ultimately lead them to their death. Had the white hats not decided to step in when they did. So we are at the tipping point, positively, but we'll wait to see the final kickback from the bad guys. Do we lock down on the 21st or the 22nd, or do we lock down on the 27th? And that's a good indicator. Does the world lock down? Do we lose our communications? And those of us who listen to me and to other spiritual patriots, you'll sit back and you think, well, thank God for that. At last, finally. And you won't at all be worried. All the other people who are these mindless idiots, they'll be running around panicking like mad, phoning 911, this, that, and the other, because it all passed them by. So I think we're there, because people often ask me, how much longer, how much longer? I don't know exactly, but I can tell you that the amount of covert work that's been done over the last 6 weeks was quite intense. It's quite frenetic. And the amount of material targets left actually is quite small. But Britain is a case in point for many obvious reasons. So I'm going to go into Christmas really hopeful for the future, but determined that CC will play its part in whatever that new future is for the world, but fighting to ensure that the truth gets out there. It isn't just Biden bad, Trump good, and let's bring the price of gas down and let's build the wall up. There's a lot more to understanding the evil tentacles of the satanic force. And I do particularly reach out to God-fearing Christian people and say, if you believe in God, then there's a devil. And it's that evil force that has worked its way into the hearts of so many people on this planet. Some of them can be saved, some of them be turned around, or some of them will go down fighting to the death, as they have done. But the light will win. But we're all a bit tired of it now. We're all a bit tired. So, let's have a vacation and let's see something happen. Right, Becky, thank you.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me okay?
Fine, no problem at all.
Great. Okay, right, I'll go to the first question. Right. This is from several members in New Zealand. Did South Africa receive the EBS or SOS a couple of weeks ago?
They only received a test run. Yeah, they call it an SOS, I think, out there. We would recognise it as an EBS. It was all scheduled to do so, but didn't for a positive reason, because a judge, a spokesperson for the White Hats, with a marshal or sheriff bodyguard, had some meetings with the Rupert family, and I can mention that. Rupert family, very, very powerful family, and those discussions were very helpful and useful. And the whole idea is to move that country into a different realm without having a real very difficult situation. So, as it stands at the moment, all of those things were put on hold because there were discussions taking place that appeared to show that there was some